Round of applause. Uh, Thank you, Robin Stauber, for hosting this Miracles series of readings for through the Patrick Heath Public Library. She's funded all of this, and her brainchild, our brainchild, to do all of this, the anthology and the readings. And so we appreciate Robin and the city of Bernie very much for this opening for us. Yes. And we have some lovely poems and readings in store tonight. By the way, my name is D. Ellis Phelps, if you have not met me. Hello, I'm the mouth on the program. And I'm the editor of the Milagros Anthology and the facilitator of these readings. And I'm very happy to have been doing that now for several months. We're doing this 2 more times, November and December. So mark your calendars for that. And if you are not already on my mailing list, if you found out about this reading from some other source, please do send me an email and I will add you to my list. I'm dellisphelps@gmail.com. And a little while I'll put that in the chat for you if you don't have it already. So without further ado, Kip Stratton is going to read for us tonight, and he tells me that he's reading to us from a work in progress, a new work in progress. And I'm going to let him tell you about that and about himself a little bit. He's going to use the first 25 or so minutes of this venue, however long he likes. And we are very happy to have you. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be here. I live in suburban Austin. I've lived in Round Rock, Texas for a number of years. And I guess I'll continue to live here because there are too many books here to move. So I'm just kind of stuck here for a while. I'm what do I want to say about myself? I'm probably best known as a writer of nonfiction. I write for Texas Monthly with some frequency. I've published 4 nonfiction books with a fifth that I'm under contract for now. And I was a freelance contributor to the Dallas Morning News for about 30 years, starting in 1989, when the book editor, the late Bob Compton, called me one day and asked me if I would be interested in reviewing a new book called Friday Night Lights. And I said, well, sure, I'll take a look at it. And I actually like the book quite a lot. I write about a variety of things that interest me. And one thing that's that most people don't know about me is that my interest in writing actually began with poetry. And as I look back at it, I had a really remarkable experience when I was in my early 20s. I had the opportunity to study with some of the great American poets of the last half of the 20th century. I had seminars with James Dickey, Donald Hall, N. Scott Momaday, and but most important of all, I studied for, again, in a seminar under William Stafford, and Stafford and I became friends after that. And I did gosh, I was still in my early 20s. I did an extensive interview with Bill for a little literary magazine and things like that. So I look back now and think that was really quite a remarkable experience, that I was able to be around those people. And plus many others, but those are kind of the big names I can think of right now. So I've always written poetry. I've published 4 books of poetry, although I tend to think of them as all part of one book. The first book I published was called Dreaming Sam Peckinpah. And Sam Peckinpah is was an American film director, probably best known for his Westerns, and probably best known for the violence in these Westerns. Although, if you study his films, you come to realize there's a lot more layering there than some of the violent stuff he introduced into his films. He's an artist who interests me a great deal. And my last a nonfiction book was a book that came out on the 50th anniversary of the release of his masterpiece, The Wild Bunch. And that was probably my most successful book, certainly the best nonfiction I've ever written. But I think a lot about Peckinpah, and I think a lot about movies and being a kind of a film nerd, and the many hours I spent in theaters watching pictures and how they define my life. And from that book, I've expanded that topic into other volumes, so that I'm now kind of working on this thing that I think of sort of as kind of like Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, this ever expanding book, but I'm actually going to cut it off after this fifth volume, I think, which I'll read a little bit of it here in a moment. When I was young, again in college, I was going to school in Oklahoma, and I went by one of those Friends of the Library sales, and I found a little thin book called Outlier and Gazelles by Jim Harrison. I had no idea who Jim Harrison was at that point, and I knew pretty well what an outlier was. I was pretty perplexed by what a gazelle might be. I mean, I knew what a gazelle was. I'd seen one of those at the zoo a few times, but I didn't know what this form was. But I started reading those Harrison poems, and I got intrigued by the way the words lay on the lines. And he experimented with this form, which actually had its roots, I believe, in Persia, and it's kind of collections of these two-line verses, and it's a very refined form if you look at the Persian verse. And he was doing experiments with it. The thing I liked about it was how he used this enjambment technique, where a line doesn't necessarily end at the end of the line, but carries on to the next one. And the way those words played against each other intrigued me. And I've always messed around with that some. So I had that going. And then what really precipitated what I'm going to read in a few minutes is in August of 2020, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and which kind of just came out of nowhere. And my mother lived in Oklahoma. I was her caregiver 500 miles away. And I became very friendly with Interstate 35 after that diagnosis. And then she died in December of 2020. Then I was the executor of her estate. So my romance with Interstate 35 did not die down any through all of that until I finally got her estate settled in June of this year. And I had my mother was an interesting woman, a conflicted woman. Probably was the victim of date rape in the mid 1950s at a rodeo, and that's why I'm here. And there's a lot for me to sort through in my life as I've confronted that. My mother was also in addition to her good qualities, was also a pretty deceptive person who often lived more comfortably in the world of untruth rather than truth. And so I set out to write about this during the time, and I ended up with a poem called "Last Red Dirt Embrace. And it is at this point 100 pages long. It is in stanzas of 5 couplets, each one following kind of the ghazal model that I read Jim Harrison fooling around with all those years ago. It is not complete, it is close. And what I'm going to read tonight is from a work in progress, so some of this may change between now and when it comes out. But the milagro part of it has to do with first establishing a relationship with my stepbrother, with whom I never had a relationship. He's older than I, a Vietnam vet who has severe PTSD and other issues. And somehow the death of my mother brought us together, which was something I didn't expect, and was, as I say, at one point, que milagro, what a miracle. And then also figuring out that the real miracle in life is sometimes just surviving and making your life work. And it doesn't it doesn't have a lot of flash involved with it, but sometimes just doing it and surviving, and then not even necessarily thriving so much as just making a life, can be pretty miraculous. And so that's kind of a background theme. I explore a lot of aspects of my life through these poems or through these verses. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read one. This is number 39. These verses are numbered. And my stepbrother's name is Eldon. And I'm going to read one kind of from the middle of the book, and then I'm going to read several from the end. And it's just so you can kind of see how this looks on paper. Let's see if I can. No, this isn't going to work too well because of this light. You can see. Maybe that's better. No, not going to work. You can see how these two-line each stanza has these couplets. And then at the bottom, I have like Oklahoma here. That means I wrote it in Oklahoma. So they're all Oklahoma or Texas as designation where they came from. So this is number 39 of this long poem. By the way, the ghazal lines are pretty long. That's another thing I thought was interesting, is how they stretch across the page in a horizontal way, whereas poetry tends to be, American poetry and English poetry seems to be a little bit more vertical, but these are going this way. I scrubbed my face at my mother's house. Hair wet, unshaved, I rolled toward nursing home obligation. Eldon and I entered plexiglass pandemic protection. America is intubated. Politicians ooze into every cranny, zombie culture, Kardashian horror, world rusted. Eldon wears overalls and a bulldozer cap. He is swollen and fractured from Vietnam 50 years ago. He owns himself now, que milagro. Charlie Don't Surf is a favorite movie line. Mom now appears in wheelchair. Texas kolaches confuse her. She cannot manage tea. She says she wants to sleep. We will never see her alive again. Cold Sun Street, and Eldon says, I won't die this way. I've always accepted this. That's number 39. Now we get to these next stanzas, these next verses. And what's going on here is I've sold my mother's house, and we're in that final phase of a probate. And I'm making what will probably be a last visit, at least for a good long while, to my hometown, the town where I was born in Oklahoma. Certainly the last one I'll make, uh, held by family reasons. So there are several of these that are addressed to my mother as I'm at the cemetery saying this kind of final goodbye. Number 84, Mother, my secret ledger is thick. I invested too much into lust and poetry. Too late to retrieve that currency. You taught me clandestine life. I lived 6 decades before I began to balance my books in sunlight. Your time was layered with guile and U-Bahn coffee cans filled with pennies and half dollars hidden in closets. I never knew. I open my accounts payable book and lay it on cemetery grass. I do not care who reads it. Roadrunners and moles peer at pages beyond your tombstone. This is how I love and breathe these days. I touch your clean stone numbers. Oklahoma. 85. Mother, I'm a movie cowboy named Jack Burns, and I ride a horse called Whiskey through this technology nightmare. I understand our demise will be Archie Bunker driving a semi-trailer truck loaded with toilets. I am sorry you inserted your purpose into the gaze of a man with broken eyes. I bled. I carry scars. I learned no one can lean on family or anyone else. It comes down to what we see with our own eyes. I spread the blanket on Whiskey. He snorts at the saddle. It is the way. 86. Well, by the way, that's a reference to a movie called Lonely Are the Brave. If you might have seen it, starred Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas always said that playing Jack Burns was his greatest role in all of his years of making films. 86. Mother, I am Warren Oates chasing Warren Oates across Kanab Badlands. The film has no point, and that is precisely the point. I lived Western violence. I photographed so many murdered men and women against bleeding Oklahoma nights. 2 a.m. phone calls when I lived at your house. I'd depart loaded with Kodak Tri-X and Smith & Wesson. Do you recall? It was flies crawling on Leone faces. It was Peckinpah anguished in filth, only more so. No Star Wars spick and span. I was not even 20. Those bodies share your soil. What that's about is when I was a teenager, when I was in high school, I got hired as a reporter on my hometown newspaper, daily newspaper. And I was the one who got sent out at night to take pictures of crime victim bodies and things like that. So when I was 18 years old, I was seeing people killed with shotguns and horrible things. And the calls always seemed to come at 2 a.m. for some reason. And I was commuting to college and living at my parents' house and working at the newspaper when all that was going on. And many of the people who were in those crimes that I covered were buried in that same cemetery where my mother ended up. So that's how they ended up sharing the soil. 87. Mother, I cannot pledge I will visit your grave again. I know you were a teenage Mariette Hartley trapped in Hammond brother terror. You were an innocent. No Joel McRae stepped in to rescue you. Grandpa had too much R.G. Armstrong in his soul. You violated code and the good book in his eyes. I believe you fell prey to date rape. Then blame and shame where compassion were nothing more than discarded peanut shells and snuff spit. I'm sorry for all you suffered. I'm also sorry you embraced deceit and methylated cigarettes to get by. I can say no more. Well, it's pretty obvious. Some references to Sam Peckinpah's Ride the High Country with Mariette Hartley's first movie in there. But, 88, Mother, morning presses on. I must soon take leave. I recollect when earthquakes hit the old place. Never in my time there did we have them, but then they came almost daily. Oil field, saltwater, high pressure injection, different from my rig days. I remember when the old man lost his body and spent days dying in living room chairs. Squirrels and rats gnawed their way into your dream house, fouling shag carpet and black velvet paintings alike. I was disconnected and could not help. A porpoise trapped in tuna netting. I gave you thousands, then sank in dead Gulf water. 89. Mother, I understand this land forged me. I look around, nothing resonates, not even scenes from strong 1930s movies. I see houses I have known forever beyond graves. They are foreign addresses now. Insects of myth crawl. They bite my back and thighs. The sheriff is disappointed I never fed you horse dewormer. Sure thing cancer cure, he said. I cannot own this place. Maybe I'm Charles Floyd bristling at being called pretty boy. Maybe I am the dung beetles at work near an 1893 grave. I am lost in these locales because I know them too well. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye. 90. I roll from cemetery to old new bank whose name changes with each Cottonwood Creek flood. Eldon awaits. We walk inside and speculate about offices of men who died before new millennium. Nothing lingers. I feel close to him. Only time in our lives. We survive. Kind woman behind plexiglass divides all that remains of my parents' lives into two checks. Sun warms brick streets outside. We pose for photo. First time ever, just the two of us framed. Doubtful we will ever see each other again. He departs. White truck, red dirt. 91. Bank of America check deposit in Edmond. I am masked like Dalton brothers as I enter. Resistol low on my brow. Such are our times. VP approves transaction. I would have emptied the till in earlier life, shotgun elbow crooked, then fled on paint across red dirt prairie land. Now, just another uncalloused suburbanite, content to toe line and sign where requested. Papers in hand, I hat tip Grat Dalton, who blows morning grass outside. The moon dies bloodless. 92. Strip malls and fast food glitter, then university sprawl. I know this place. It is foreign to me. Liberal arts bricks, ancient now, cutting edge then. Times of revelation and crime. Nothing to see here. Forgive holstered dreams, drive on. Turnpikes with unknown names, extended broad ways. Surviving is the true miracle. I am Phaedrus streaming Hank Williams and Patsy Cline in morning sun while wearing 1970s hat and jeans, all claims discharged. I can depart this territory at last. 93. Lexus dissolved to 1975 BMW R75-5, 4 lanes headed southwest, the best. OKC sprawl fading behind me. Motorcycle wheels wholly on H.E. Bailey concrete. Luggage trashed at truck stop receptacle 20 miles behind. I am a pilgrim desperate for shrines. I know where they lie. This is no movie. Billy Sims barbecue break and Wichita Mountain loom. I am where this began. Rocks, sweat, mists. Vulture's kettle. 40 years ago, the BMW cools. So that's a sampling of what I'm working on, and I can tell you what the last verses will concern. I have in recent months reconnected with a lot of people in the Comanche Nation, and I went to an event on the medicine mounds. Do you all know about the medicine mounds in West Texas? There are these 4 dolomite hills that were created through erosion. Each one is bigger than the next one. They're out by in Hardeman County, close to Quanah, and below them are just the plains, you know. And those mounds were always sacred to the Comanche. And I was invited to attend a Native American church meeting, the Comanche chapter, which was the first one for that whole thing, that was started by Quanah Parker himself. And it is an all-night event that the medicine used is peyote, and it's an intense thing to go through, and a beautiful thing to go through. The next day I did a sweat lodge with some young Comanche men and a Kiowa guy. And then the day after that, I climbed to the top of the medicine lodge, or medicine mound, excuse me, where you can see for literally hundreds of miles over the plains. And those last verses will deal with that. I just kind of have them sketched out right now. But that is, that is the kind of upbeat conclusion to this, is we come together and there's something bigger than we are. And it's kind of caught up in these old traditions. And where you're really pulling from our grandmother, the earth, and then whatever it is that's up there, you know. So that's where this will conclude in about 10 more verses. So that's it.
Kip, thank you so much. What powerful work. Everyone is silent. That tells you something.
Oh, well, I thought maybe
that tells you we're all just going, wow.
I thought I'd put people to sleep.
No, we're all just engrossed in what you're saying and what you're dealing with. And Everybody give Kip a little something. Give him a
I'm
Well,
fascinated with your story.
thank you.
I'm visualizing, and I know I'm going to dream about your life tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
All of it was
I
very compelling.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well,
I
like I
love where
say,
you're going with the ending. I love that you're talking about the healing that you've experienced, Kip, in that way.
well, I'll say this. I mentioned rocks sweating and vultures kettling and all of that. Those are lines from the very first poem in the first book, Dreams of Sam Peckinpah. And when I was poems I wrote at that point, when I was hanging a lot with William Stafford and spending a lot of time in the Wichita Mountains, which is where the Comanche Nation headquarters is, as well as the Apaches, and then just to the north, Iowas. And so it was kind of interesting to kind of bring this back home to a poem I wrote 40 years ago. And it's that the whole process here has been kind of interesting. Dreaming Sam Peckinpah, the first volume, was a collection of poems written over about a 35-year period. And then the next 4 books were all written over 4 years. So
I
they're
have one question for you.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take up too much time because we have several other wonderful
sure.
readers who are going to speak to us about miracles as well. But I wonder, a couple of times you read a poem and then you said, now the story behind that is this and this and this. And I wonder, and this may be just a rhetorical question, not for you to answer, but if you've thought about how you might include some of those stories that will help the reader understand more about what you're writing about, also like almost like poetry
Yeah.
sort of way. I wonder if you
Well,
considered that.
my I have actually, and I thought um, if you're familiar with T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, there's kind of the backstory part, prose part, that's actually longer than the poem itself. And I thought about doing something like that, although I wouldn't make it longer than the collection of poems themselves, but kind of explain what the mythology here is that I'm drawing from, my own mythology, and doing that. But then I'm also conflicted by that because I believe that once you've written a poem, you no longer own it. It's owned by the readers. So if you have these metaphors that are popping up in these symbols, and you say to yourself, what is this about? What do these mean? How do these work together? And then the reader can do his or her own explications and come up with something that might be completely different from what you were thinking when you wrote it, where you were drawing from. So so I'm kind of conflicted there. Yeah, I don't want to. I truly believe when you write a poem, you no longer own it. It's out there. It's kind of like when you write a song, it's not yours anymore. It's whoever's singing it down the block or whatever. And but yeah, I have thought about doing that in some way. So
Okay.
maybe people a few guideposts.
We'll keep us posted. We'll find you and figure out what you've done. It'll be fun.
Okay, great. And again, thank you so much for allowing me to
Thank
read.
you very much for sharing with us. We appreciate your openness and good luck with your work as you carry on with it.
Great, thank you.
And tonight we also have with us some illustrious writers who are all published in the Milagros anthology, the name of which is now Easing the Edges, in case you hadn't heard. And we have Sandi Stromberg, Martha K. Grant, Rachel Jennings, and Kendra Leonard, and Miss Billings, who are going to read for us. And I didn't have a particular order, but Martha asked if she could go kind of early on in the program because there's something she's attending a little bit later on. So she's more gusto than I am about getting on something else after this. But I want to invite Martha K. Grant to read for us first. And Martha, tell us a little bit about who you are and about your, whatever you want to say about yourself. And thank you very much for being here. Hey, Martha.
Can you hear me? Okay, this is
Yes,
good.
ma'am.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I'm waiting for my picture to pop up, but I guess I don't really need to see myself. You can hear me? Okay,
We can hear you and we can see you.
okay, you're still the big one on my screen, so I don't really need to see myself. Gallery. Okay. This is a piece called Truce, Truce, not truth, but truce. It's a true story. It's not a poem. It's a little true story. Home from kindergarten, he bursts through the door, drops his backpack in the middle of the floor and shouts, "Want to play a game?" Today, he isn't satisfied with the usual Legos or Lincoln Logs, those noisy plastic ducks, or even setting up his train. He wants to play Army Men. I'm a pacifist grandma who doesn't allow toys and games of violence in my own home. But I'm at his house, and he is not dissuaded no matter how hard I try. Reluctantly, I make an exception and take from the playroom shelf the bin of little soldiers, thinking, surely I'm not agreeing to do this, but it seems that I am. We face each other cross-legged on the carpet. He spreads out the field of battle between us, a plastic cloth printed with a brown desert landscape, divided by a winding blue river. He portions out the plastic battalions, gives me the gray soldiers, picks the green for himself. The figures are hard plastic, 2 or 3 inches high, in various warlike poses, on one knee aiming a rifle, or tossing a grenade, or creeping stealthily along the ground. He wants to keep both airplanes, the big tank, and the amphibious vehicle for himself. This leaves me with only a small tank and a helicopter with a broken rotor. I complain, hey, why don't we each have 3? Surveying his larger stash, he admits sheepishly, oh, this isn't fair. He passes me an airplane. While arranging our soldiers and deciding which side of the river will be occupied by whose men, my mind is working overtime. I argue with myself, question whether I've sold out, and whether this would be a good time for an anti-war tutorial instead, an effort to develop a preschool pacifist. But here I am with a battalion of gray soldiers facing a battalion of green across the river and ideologically opposed to anybody shooting anybody. I stall for time. My guys are hot and sweaty, I say. We're going swimming. I line mine up on the river that divides their encampments. We aren't swimming, he sniffs. After my soldiers have cooled off, his are itching for battle. I say, wait a minute, now we're having lunch, and circle mine behind my tank. We're having beans and weenies. What are your guys having? He's impatient. We're not hungry. I give in to dogfights in the air, our fighter planes zooming, swooping, and crashing over our heads. It's hard to stall a little boy from the pow-pow of real action. I allow my soldiers to drop and play dead in accommodating fashion early in the game, less time to worry about my compromised so-called principles. I wonder if something else is at work here. After all, he recently withstood tests, surgeries, and chemo for lymphoma, weathering it in good humor. Now in remission, he has stepped back into the normal life of a little boy. The event merely a blip on his childhood screen. But I notice how his playtime is heavily invested in superhero characters lately. His collection of costumes and capes for action figures rivals any store's Halloween display. Most days he'll be wearing at least one of them. Maybe now, a year later, he's working out fears he wasn't able to voice during those months in treatment. It seems important to indulge him, even a privilege to participate, I have to admit. We take panels of plastic barbed wire fence and divide them up, then realize there aren't enough pieces for our separate troops. Pooling resources, we prop our fences together and call it the Army Hospital, plunking gray guys and green guys alike in for rest and rehab. When the shooting starts again, periodically I'll interject, okay, now we're going to have a nap, and reconnoiter my troops behind a tank for a break. We're going to shoot you, he says. You can't, I argue. We're having time out. We're going night-night. He considers this. I can tell he can't come up with an argument. He shrugs, okay, and agrees that maybe his men will sleep too. A temporary truce is called, while we lay the riflemen and grenadiers over on their sides, on their respective banks of the river, and pretend they are snoring loudly as night falls on the plastic desert. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. So fun to hear you read that. I've read it and I heard your
Yeah.
voice reading it so many times already, but it's just a lot of fun to hear you.
Yeah, that's my
Tell us
grandson.
how old this grandson is now.
He's 20. He's a sophomore in college and he's very well, thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Very
Thank you,
well.
Dee, and thank you, Robin, for putting this on. I appreciate the opportunity to read and to hear all these good voices.
Yes, thank you, Martha, so much. I appreciate your reading, and I'm glad you're here. And when you go, we'll try not to miss you too much.
Okay, I can catch a little bit. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. I wonder if Chris Billings would like to go next. What do you think, Chris? Just to unmute yourself there first.
There we go. Are we good?
There you go.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
I want to thank Dee for putting this on. Like everybody said, this is a good thing, and I appreciate the invite. My name is Chris. I'm a member of the Sun Poets here, Sun Poet Society in San Antonio. I actually live in Schertz, Texas. I don't have any books out. I've self-published 5 chapbooks, but I not through any kind of a publishing house. Like I said, self-published though. But if you find me on Facebook, I do tend to share a lot of my poetry on my Facebook page. So you're more than welcome to check me out. If it's okay, I'm going to read a couple of them here, one of my own and one also out of the anthology from the contributor Sarah Joy Thompson, who's a friend of mine, and she's actually living in Ireland right now. So I'm going to start with hers. First one's called Cold Moon, December 29th, 2020. The gas fire on high in the fireplace reminds me of the elaborate break of your laugh. Same glimmer, crackle, pop, same warmth that cocoons me. Sitting by the hearth, I've come prepared for December's full moon, restless, dreaming. I've poured my sleepy time tea high, avoiding sweet, hot chocolate or mulled wine. Opted not to fill a plate with moist fruitcake, ginger snaps, peppermint sticks, or winter treats. Just a bit of toast and peanut butter to be practical, prepared as lights dim. I want only love radiating around me now at the end of the long trudge this year has been. So gather near me, you three, man, child, hound, pile on, blanket me with your essential heat. Sing some drowsy lullabies in a heap until our lashes blink languidly and our dreams sashay to solitary footpaths and woodlands on their merry way home. So that was from Sarah Joy Thompson. And then I'll just go ahead and read my own. This one's called A Time for Every Purpose. He was feeling sorry for himself on yet another gray, wet morning, stifled by the humidity and the times. Looking out over the rain-soaked yard, his gaze stopped at a sago palm damaged by the freeze earlier in the year. He spotted it peeking out from the dead-looking trunk, a bit of green, a hint of a frond, a sign of new growth and hope. A mockingbird landed on the fence, scolding him, telling him, just let the rain do its job. Thank you. And that's it.
Thank you, Chris, very much. Oh, you didn't use much time, but yay for reading Sarah's and yours both. Y'all, Sarah has a new baby. She's in Ireland with her husband for a while. I think they might be there a year or two. And she has a new, like a 2-week-old son. So congratulations to Sarah, Sarah Joy. So Kendra, I don't remember if I said your name a while ago when I was saying this is who we have to read tonight. If I didn't, I deeply apologize. I do have you on the roster, and I wonder if you would like to read next.
You did mention it earlier. So
Okay,
yeah, I'll go
good.
ahead. I'm Kendra Preston Leonard. I'm coming to you from just outside of Houston. This poem is called Llamas. The wheat is as tasseled as horsetails, and the day is as long as the fields are gilded. On my hair and my shoulders, this airy gold lands, dust and filament and moat. There's a late season fawn by the oak tree, hidden and secret and warm. The field stays unthreshed all around her. We wait for her mother to come. With soft stalks and short pieces of ribbon or laces or twine or thread, I twist up the dollies and wreaths. The sickle and scythe are stopped in the field, and the hares come to glean in the dusk. The loaves I have made are the goddess and the owl and the sheaf and a ring. I have gemmed them with salt and with yarrow. The night brings you love, spice, and sight. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Are you going to read something else?
I
Just that?
figured in interest of time, I would just stick to what's in the collection.
Well, we were doing that, but also I was asking people if they wanted to read more than one. So you think about it. If you think of something else you would like to share that you found in the anthology to be interesting to you, someone who isn't here, you can let me know in a little while. Thank you
Okay,
so
thank you.
much. Thank you so much for coming to us and for reading to us. You have that memorized. You
No,
had
I
that
have multiple
memorized?
screens up on my computer.
Oh, you tricked me. Perfect, perfect. Okay. How about Sandi Stromberg? Do you feel like reading now, Sandy?
Sure.
Thank
Whenever.
you. Welcome. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm over here in Houston too, and Dee and I crossed paths. I guess it was a couple of years ago when I answered a submission call for poems about vultures. And she did this wonderful anthology, Purifying Wind. And so I always like to keep up with her because she's always doing interesting projects. And I thought this one is so meaningful to look at everyday miracles in our life during the pandemic. So thanks to Dee and to Robin Stauber and to the Patrick Keys Library in Bernie. So I have 4 poems in here, and I was so delighted to have these poems. They're poems that just are slices out of my life, and were written to kind of remember those moments. And the first one is about my son. And in 2005, he called me from New York and he said, "Mom, I'm coming through Houston on my way to the Philippines to get married," which was rather a shock. So this poem is about that. Undiscovered song. He followed me like a duckling, this second son, clutching my skirt as soon as he walked. Even on this visit home, he has me on a short leash. He, who lived on Brooklyn's Flatbush Avenue, secured a job in Istanbul, weathered our broken home. When I tell him he's a man now, he pleads, "But I want to be a little boy." He is a Peter Pan, a blonde flyboy about to board China Air, his whole world stashed in a guitar case, a ragged red satchel, a backpack. I want to ask what happened to the rest, the Stratocaster and amplifiers, the quilt my mother made. I, who am mired in possessions, unable to jettison their weight, afraid to lose my wins and wares. I laud his escape from this hand-me-down hook as I mourn the startling losses. At security's glass wall, I watch the silent movie of our separation. Guards pull him aside to unpack a clown car of instruments, guitar, Tibetan bells, mallet, drumsticks, and one horsehair bow wrapped in socks and red plaid boxers. Puzzled faces turn toward him. He turns toward me, winks and shrugs. A composer, he's gathering notes as he repacks, music to reflect his mood, this place, the story. I watch his banter, and when everyone laughs, his wry grin. He puts one foot and then the other on the escalator, his contrary eyes on mine. He rises, up, up, up. Each second takes him further away until he reaches the top. A troubadour stepping into his restless, undiscovered song. And the second poem is, we did a sailing trip years ago in the Cyclades Islands in Greece. And this took place on Tinos, one of the islands. On Tinos, how can I explain the softness of prickly rosemary? The warmth that flooded me as the Greek driver jumped from the taxi, picked a bouquet of branches, then laid them in my unexpected arms. For the mother of two blonde, blue-eyed boys, his dark eyes seemed to say, his tongue not knowing the English words. With a deep bow, he draped me in the dew of the sea, like Aphrodite when she rose from the Aegean. Here on Tinos' gray-brown hills high above water, his gift awakened a thirst to be seen, sustenance for those long spells of drought. In the flicker of dreams, I've learned to gather rosemary's wild scent for remembrance. Communion. Windshield wipers frenetic, I bumped down the dark, pocked road, headlights wavering across the pavement. My workload has spilled like the rain into evening, and I break my day-old sandwich in half, bread dry, filling sparse. A woman with dinner candles in her eyes breaks beside me. The warmth of an intimate evening surrounds her car. She stares my way. When I chew another chalky bite, while I chew another chalky bite, she tilts her head in a judgment I fear echoes my own. As if it were a glass of wine, she raises her sandwich in a toast. Though I turned left and she goes straight, my lips taste laughter. Grace notes. A poet reads about a trinity in Miami. Two rich white women escaping January Maine, and a panhandler recovering from pneumonia due to AIDS. One woman reaches into her purse and hands the man a $20 bill. He turns it over and over in his scabbed hands and coughing whispers, Do you know how much this is? Another poet says, that isn't a poem, no lift, no elevation. And I think of James Wright's The Hook, with its moment of divine rawness at a dark bus stop in Minneapolis. The warmth of frigid steel as a Sioux Indian places 65 cents gently with his hook in the freezing hand of a young man. Thank you.
Beautiful, Sandy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me be part of this anthology.
I'm so happy. Yeah, and this was a blind reading. So it's fascinating to me once I read the poems and choose them, who it is who wrote them. So it's wonderful too. That's a fun process. Yeah. Excellent. Oh, thank you, Sandy. Be sure and read the chat. Some people are giving you commentary in the chat. Let's see. Rachel Jennings is here with us tonight. I'm so happy you're here, Rachel. It's nice to, I already said this, but it's nice to meet you. Tell us a little bit about who you are and read some poems for us.
Yeah, my name is Rachel Jennings, and it's wonderful to be here with all of you tonight. I live here in San Antonio. I teach at San Antonio College. I've published about 3 chapbooks and have published poems in different journals and magazines. I thought I just have a couple of poems to read, and one I wanted to read was by Robert Okaji, who's in the anthology. And I noticed he had a couple of poems, and I liked both of them. This one seemed to connect with me. So I think I'll read Finding Shelter. If nothing changed, what then could you learn? We display shirts, tapestries, mended socks looming in disarray, measured in pairs. The illusion is of stability, but not like the four-cornered marriage or Mount Fuji captured in the great waves curl. No, ordinary yet grand. We endure unravelings and ellipses, questions and goodbyes, loving too the synchronicities of caressed cheeks and concealed bruises of dogs and their true needs, of old men finding shelter at last, assembling distinct lives, touching unfamiliar fabric, this thread inside, multiplied, woven anew. I really enjoyed his contributions. He lives in Indiana, and he's published a large number of poems. My poem, I'm just reading my poem from the anthology, Disclaimer, which also has something to do with threads and fabrics. If you have bought some textiles, or not just textiles, but ceramics, different crafts, sometimes when you purchase it, it comes with this little disclaimer. So that's the title of my poem, Disclaimer. Notice, this poetry has bumps and uneven places. These imperfections and inconsistencies are part of the fabric and are not flaws. Free verse is a natural product and thus will have a small number of intrinsic flubs. It is advisable to read each line several times and more slowly than one might think is needed. These flubs are small, cosmetic, and do not affect the poem's performance in end-use projects, prayers, petitions, protests. Many readers will be happy to leave jagged edges to show the innate character of lines. Other readers may want more smoothly woven material. For such users, we suggest cutting out naughty questions, tear-stained discolorations, and other anomalies. Though we remove much rough phrasing that goes against the warp and woof of the stanzas, a few snags may still be present in places. Most tangles and loose threads will disappear with careful scissoring. Free verse is an organic material, and natural variances may be present in published poetic texts. Still, if you know what questions to ask a poem, and if you know what to look for, you will love the natural form. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you, Rachel. I love that poem. I think that is so clever. You did a great job of creating blank verse or free verse into a fabric, and that was just, I thought was very clever. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I haven't left anybody out who is scheduled to read. Sandy, Chris, Martha, Kendra, Rachel, and you. I think that's all we have for you tonight. I appreciate you all coming, those of you who read and those of you who came to listen. Please stay tuned for next month about the same time, November. I forgot the date. Let me tell you. It's November 4th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And if you send me an email or send Robin an email and you want to know about that, you want to get an email reminder, send one of us an email and we'll make sure you're on that list. So give yourselves, take yourselves off mute real quick. Everybody take yourself off mute. Reach up and unmute yourself. Go ahead then and just give us a big woohoo!
Ooh, awesome. What a great
And
evening. Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you all. Good night. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you for hosting this. I enjoyed the readings. Good night.
Oh, thank
Good
you.
night.
Ken.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thank you, guys.